So in this out to lunch column, I mean, you spent a lot of time abroad. You said here, man, I love Italy. You love the Italians, and you tell the story in here of it was your first trip to Europe, and you had a heck of an experience on that. First trip. I'm sure. Talk about learning from a real difficult situation. This is really amusing. But I'll let you tell it. I won't even tell them what it's about. You want to share?
You're talking about my train trip.
Yes.
My great train trip with 6 large pieces of luggage.
Yes.
Well, I'll start off by telling you this was our first, Renee and I, we were doing the act. We had started doing the act, I don't know, 2 or 3 years before. We were very busy and we needed a vacation. And, I didn't pay for the trip. I never paid, we used to take a cruise just about every year after this, I never paid for him because I entertained on the ship. I would do one appearance. It still cost me money because I had to turn down all the gigs, all the appearances that I would have done if I didn't take the trip, Sure. So it wasn't if I was making big money here. I was losing money, but at least we needed a vacation. I needed the rest of whatever you call it up here, the mind, So, but this was our first trip to Europe. It was on the Cristoforo Colombo. I'll never forget it. I made some lifelong friends on that trip that, lasted. A lot of them passed away, at my age. Too many people I know pass away, on it, who are about my age that I met then. Anyway, we took the trip. We went to the southern part of Italy, Naples, Sorrento, the Ile de Capri, the Isle of Capri, and Pompeii. And we visited all these places. We spent quite a bit of time there. And then we had to take this train from the southern part of Italy to the Italian Riviera to a town called Rapallo. Mm-hmm. And that's the one where we had 6 pieces of luggage, and there were men conductors. I don't know if it's still that way. They were very good then. I was traveling first class. They brought all the luggage on for me. And what started the problem, or what was the center of the problem, is that I had a bad right arm. I couldn't move my right arm above elbow level. So I had trouble with the luggage, and these men helped me get it up and put it up on the racks. Okay, I had 6 pieces of luggage. We were traveling first class, as I say, and we were in a first class cabin. There was one other person in that room. It was a middle-aged or older Italian lady who just nodded at us. We nodded at her. She obviously couldn't speak English, and I didn't speak Italian. The only Italian I learned was il parlato italiano solamente per sopravvivere. I speak Italian only for survival. I learned that in every language. In French, the same thing. Je parle français seulement pour survivre. And they would laugh. People would laugh, and they would work along with me because I started doing that before I learned to get along in languages. I was pretty good at that, using my memory systems and so forth. Because it all boils down to memory, to remember, how do I say so-and-so? I got to remember it. Okay. I remember somebody asking me, I go off on tangents, Rudy, so if I'm going too off, stop me. What you did?
It's my favorite.
The tangents.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, because I was talking about remembering language, and I may have told you this before. I was in Portugal, and a friend that I knew, a magic friend that I met in Portugal, took me to a restaurant, and they had little clams there, and I loved clams at that time anyway. And I ordered the clams. I loved them, and they only spoke Portuguese in this restaurant, no English at all, because he took me to a place where there were no tourists kind of things. And I said to him, if you're not with me and I'm at a restaurant, I want to order clams. What's the word for clams in Portuguese? Well, the word is ameijoas. And the reason I'm telling you this is, I'm talking about, I don't know, 70 years ago, 60 years ago, and I'll never forget the word. Why? Because as soon as he told it to me, I visualized, I told you all memory is based on association. You got to associate the 2 important things. In this case, the clam, and the word for clam. So I visualized a gigantic clam coming out of the sea, and it was dripping seaweeds and mud and sand. And I looked at it and I said, what a mess you is. And that's it. Instead of what a mess you is, because that's all I needed to do. What a mess you, and I never forgot the word for clam. It's interesting. I put that in Apocalypse or one of my books, and I had people call me over the years saying, you know, I can't forget the word for a clam in that Portuguese because I read this about what a mess you is, you know. Anyway, so that's the story about remembering it. I was in Italy and we didn't speak to this lady. We just nodded at each other in the first class cabin. Now, part of the problem was, you know, this was our first major trip, but I certainly have learned since then. I hadn't asked what was the stop before Apollo, so I know to get myself ready to get off the train. I only knew the approximate time that we were supposed to arrive in Rapallo. And also I realized we were in the first class part of the train was the rear of the train. So when we pulled into a station, I didn't see the station because the front part of the train is what stopped at the station itself. So I didn't know the name of the stop. Somebody was calling him off, but I couldn't hear him. I couldn't make him out. And I didn't know the name of the town that we stopped at until we were leaving it. Because the end of the train where we were sitting would pass and I'd see the big sign where it was. And at each stop, what I started to do, because I was getting nervous, I would yell out, is this Rapallo? And people would yell back, no, Rapallo. Okay, well, to make a long story short, finally, I yelled out, is this Rapallo? And I heard, see, Rapallo. Well, I started to get up to get my, I had forgotten about my arm. I couldn't reach up. I never thought of telling the conductors not to put my luggage up on the racks, but to leave them on the floor so I could pick them up. I couldn't reach them. Renee started to try to help me, but she couldn't pick up, and I got scared. I didn't want to fall on her, you know. Well, what happened, what makes the story kind of interesting, is the Italian lady that hadn't said a word, this gray-haired older woman got up and started to pantomime to leave because the train was starting to leave very slowly. And she started to pantomime. She looked at the luggage and pointed to herself, and she said she pointed to the window to get out of the train. Well, I did. I got out of the train and helped Renee out. You got to remember, we were much younger at the time. I couldn't do that now. I don't think I'd die, you know. I helped Renee out of the train, and it was difficult because by the time I got to help Renee out, the train was starting to move faster, and I was looking again, trying to get a luggage, and the lady again pantomimed. She pointed to herself, saying she would throw the luggage out the window, and sure enough, as the train was moving faster than we started to walk, I saw one big piece of luggage come out the window, and then another one, and we kept walking, and she threw out all the pieces of luggage, and we walked, and we didn't get to the station. There was a conductor with a cart that came running after us, and everybody on the station standing there were laughing. We thought it was a comment. Maybe it was a movie scene. One person actually thought it was a movie scene.
Wow.
And yeah, and this guy came and we started to walk to pick up. He was laughing, but he picked up all the luggage and took us to the platform. That's it. Can you believe that? I mean, how do you forget? You know, we've traveled all over the world, and I have, of course, and even after Renee left me, I was traveling all over the world. And most of it blends, you know, a lot of it, unfortunately, but there are certain things that stand out clearly, and that's one of them. Yeah. You know, how do you forget something like that?
The image of that, just reading it, it's funny to hear you talk about it, but just to read it, I just can visualize that stuff just being
flying out, right? Oh,
after it was just really, really funny. I mean, you've had some incredible stuff happen in your long life. Wow.
Absolutely. It's amazing.
Wow.
I always say it, of course, obviously, I'm kidding. I always say, gee, I could write a book. I mean, it's amazing the things, the places I've seen, the things I've done. I didn't realize I was in quote doing them at the time till I look back. And of course, the fact that I'm older, and I did, I traveled basically all over the world many times.
Mhm.
Spent a couple of weeks in Australia a few times, Japan, the Philippines. I stayed in Manila. I stayed in so many different places, got involved in so many different things only because I was performing in those places. In
Well,
Australia, I ended up doing every major television show. It was easier there because they speak English. A lot of the other places was difficult because of the language barrier. But in Australia, I did every major television show, and I traveled to different towns. Also, what started to happen, Rudy, is that either I would contact them or they would ask me magicians groups. I fortunately magicians groups wanted me to lecture for
mhm.
them. But their budgets, I couldn't do it. I'm not going to fly from New York City to Australia for their whatever $300
Right.
amount they could pay me. Uh, so what happened somehow, this part I've forgotten whether I would tell them or it was fortunate that somehow somebody asked me just when I was going to make a trip. The only time I was able to lecture in foreign to me places like that, Australia or Japan, Manila, where I did lectures when the magicians knew I was going to be in town.
Mm.
Then I would say, yeah, whatever their budget was, I would do it. What they had to pay was one extra hotel night because what I was through with what I was there for, my memory work, and I was going to leave that day, they had to keep me over one extra day to lecture for them. They had to pay the hotel room, and they had to drive me.
But I noticed there because there's another story, and I don't remember which. I'll have to look it up which volume it is. But it hasn't always been about the money because there's a point where you're talking about Alex Trebek, I believe it was, and they wanted you to come and I think perform for Alex Trebek's audience. Do you remember this? And they were going to offer you quite a significant amount of money, but you wanted them to not do it in April because there was going to be some convention or something where they were going to either honor you or you were going to do a lecture, and you
I
chose.
turned it down.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
turned it down when there was a lot of money. I mean, really 10
yeah,
times more than what you would have gotten for that
yeah.
lecture there. But your concern more was for these magicians and not necessarily feeding your ego, which some people will be like, really? That's a surprise.
Oh no, 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 no. I admit I like to feed my ego. But on the other hand, more important to me is I'm not going to turn down people.
Yeah.
Those things happen to me over the years or decades, whatever. That's a terrible thing when people are expecting you. You say, gee, I'm sorry, I can't make it. I can't do things like that.
Right.
The Alex Trebek thing is very vague in my mind, but I do remember something like it. Turn it down. I remember Renee saying, are you sure you want to do that?
Exactly. She said, are you nuts? I think is what you quoted her saying.
Yeah, that part I do remember. And I said, yeah, hon, I just can't turn down. And she agreed with me. She just wanted to make sure I knew what I was doing. Yeah, I knew what I was doing. Look, I'm a depression kid. I was born in 1926. The Big Depression is 1929. I had to live through years of that. So money is important to me. I was brought up that way. Not having food, I don't want to go into that, but it was a terrible situation. So yeah, I hate to turn down money, but on the other hand, I just can't turn down people that are expecting me and have done publicity about it and things like that. I just couldn't do that. I still can't.
Yeah. Well, I think it demonstrates integrity. So I respect that and appreciate it.
Yeah, I just look. I hated when people did those things to me, which happened occasionally, and that annoyed the heck out of me. At the last minute, people telling me, "Gee, something's come up. I can't do it," and I would say, "Well, get rid of the thing that came up," you know. But people are different. I just couldn't do that because it would end up annoying me for months after, and I'd rather turn down the money than it suffer with the annoyance.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Was we're talking here about the memories that you have of of your life. A lot of the stories that I'm reading here in Apocalypse made their way into Before I Forget, which for those watching this is Harry's re-memoir, which Mel Brooks gave him that title.
He said, call it a re-memoir, yeah.
Like that. But, you know, I would encourage anybody who doesn't have that book, who's a fan of yours, that even if they don't really necessarily know you, or they're maybe becoming a fan, there's some fascinating stories in there. And one of which, I don't know if you feel comfortable sharing. I mean, you shared in the book, so it's not like it's a secret.
Right.
One of the things that shocked me when I read your memoir, which actually I audibly gasped because it caught me off guard, because you go from telling the story and then you just abruptly share how it ends. It caught me off guard, and it's with regard to your dad and how your father passed away. Now, you've talked about this before on just a couple of episodes ago about your dad. He would punch you. He wasn't exactly the greatest father, I take it. But could you share some of the events leading up to your father's passing, and then how that all transpired? Because I think, to me, it says a lot. It just gives me a lot of empathy when you hear somebody's story and the stuff that they went through. I think in certain cases, and this one for sure, it helps understand a person. Now, because again, some people bust your chops and they go, gosh, he's got an ego. And well, we all have an ego.
Of course.
But you make no bones about it. It's like, yeah. But
yeah, of course I have an ego.
But I think some of the events of your life shaped you and made you this man who you are, who you've been. And I think this event was very defining in the life of Harry Lorayne. And so
I had a very strange childhood. I don't remember my mother and father, who died when I was 12. So again, you see how far back I'm going. Mm-hmm. I don't remember them ever saying to me, I love you. I don't remember ever being hugged. I thought that's the way it was till I grew older and realized that's not the way it was.
Yeah.
Children were told, I love you by their parents, or hugged by their parents. So it was a very strange childhood. And yeah, my father punched me. You know that story. I can't say that anymore when I'm being interviewed. When I tell the story, I have to say my father punished me. That's okay. Why that's a difference, I don't know. Of course, if somebody said to me, how did he punish you? I'd say I don't want to use the word punch. It seemed I think now it would be okay. When I originally told this story on the Johnny Carson show, and it created a big disturbance, couldn't say punch for some reason. It's like when I did the Ed Sullivan show, and I think I told you this too, when he was doing rehearsal, the comedian used the word pregnant. He said, well, it was a different world. I mean, what's wrong with using the word pregnant? Sullivan wouldn't allow it. Wow. Okay, and punch was a dirty word, I guess, So anyway, when my father, the way he died, it's not very interesting. He was very ill. The one time he ever hugged me, I was sleeping on the couch. Got to remember, I was about just earlier, before 12 years old. And my mother was taking him out. He was going to the hospital. And as he passed my couch, he kneeled down and gave me a hug. That was the only time in the 12 years I knew him that he gave me a hug. And he ended up in the hospital. And it's not a very interesting story. We used to go to the hospital. My uncle, his name was Max, was there. And I remember my father saying, oh, I'd like to jump out of the window. He was on the 16th floor of the hospital. And I remember my uncle saying, anybody could do that. Why don't you go downstairs and jump up here from the sidewalk? That was his idea of a joke. The end of the story is my father jumped out of the window.
Gosh, Harry.
Yeah. So that was...
because it's interesting, your choice of words, to say that that's not interesting. To me, that's like incredibly profound that he would do that. I mean, you get a hug, maybe he must have known that he was going to take his own life, but
I guess so, yeah.
It's shocking. And what does that do to you as a little 12-year-old boy? I mean, you're just a kid. Yeah. How did that impact you? Were you must have been angry? I mean, deeply wounded? How did you respond to that?
I don't remember. I don't remember my feeling, but I've discussed this with people before. I remember discussing it with a friend who was into psychology or a psychiatrist. I'm not sure what it was, but something like this came up. He said, but Harry, all these things that happened to you, they helped shape what you are. Oh, I said, look, at that point, anyway, I don't know if I'd say the same thing now, but this is a couple of decades ago. I say, look, I'm pretty pleased with the shape I'm in and what I've accomplished and et cetera, et cetera. So I guess I was lucky in that respect. In other respects, I didn't even want to think about these things. And these are repetitive, I know. I didn't know about brushing my teeth till I was in my teens. And you have no idea the problems that has caused and is still causing. I was never taught about brushing my teeth. I didn't know about it.
Mm.
Things like that. I mean, like I told you, my parents were professional poor people.
Mm.
I lived in an area where everybody was poor, the Lower East Side at that time. I don't know how it is now. But at that time, it was a ghetto. And as I mentioned before, I didn't know that word, but I realized that the difference was, you have to understand, Rudy, there was no television then.
Mm.
There was no computer. I thought the whole world was like that. I didn't know any different. All the kids that I walked to PS 188, which is the school I went to most of my young life, they were all poor kids. Otherwise, they wouldn't be living there and going to PS 188,
Right.
It's incredible. So when I look back, like this psychiatrist or psychologist said, I guess in one way I was lucky, if you can call that lucky. Having dental problems all my life, I still have dental problems because my parents never taught me to brush my teeth.
It's first of all, I've seen the way you are with Bobby, and I've heard you. You picked up the phone when he called at one of the other interviews that we did, and hey, I love you, honey. A father's love for his son. I mean, that father-son or a father-child relationship,
Right.
is so huge. The dads, the impact that they can have on their child, for the better or for worse. And the fact that you overcame what was this huge chasm between you and your dad in not repeating that behavior. You love Bobby and you make no bones about it. You hug him and you're not afraid to kiss him. No affection.
Always. I never talked to him without saying, when we were saying goodbye, I love you. Never. Now, I once told him that. I said, you have to forgive me. Maybe I'm overdoing it, but it's because of my upbringing, really. I will never, ever leave him when I'm going there tonight for dinner. There's no way when he drives me home, I don't give him a hug and say, I love you. Always. The same to my granddaughter or my daughter-in-law.
Oh, sure.
I love you, of course. I realize I may be overdoing it, but that's the reason for it, is the story I just told you, that I never heard those things when I was a kid. Never.
I think it's a beautiful thing, Harry. I think all fathers can learn from that. To tell your kids you love them. To overdo it.
Of course. So, I'd rather overdo it than not do it.
Yeah.
That's for sure, which is what my parents did. Maybe that was the thing then. Maybe all parents of their ilk did that. I don't know. Right. But I do know what went on with me personally. I just never heard I love you. And as I said, I never got a hug. I could have been a stranger in the house. I didn't get along with my brother at all. He was 5 years older than me. So we used to be served our meals separately. So that's my upbringing. And aside from the friends I had, I mean, some of them were okay, but as I grew older, I started to learn to separate from certain people. It was a strange area, the Lower East Side. As I said before, I don't know how it is now. I haven't been there in decades. I'm assuming it's better than it used to be, but it was awful when I was gangs having wars with each other. I mean, I was involved in some of those things. For a little guy, I used to carry a brick in my hand in case somebody came and hit me and I'd hit him back with a brick. I mean, there's not very good stories.
Jeez, Harry, I'm telling you, man,
like I keep saying, right? I could write a book. And I didn't plan these things, Don. I mean, that was it. There was nothing I could do about it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Well, again, with this, what you faced with your pops, with your dad, and the lack of love there, and again, what I think is a very, very traumatic way in which he left this earth, not having told you that he loved you or showed you any affection. Again, getting back to this thing, which I'll leave it alone after this, but when people start accusing you of having this ego, all of us want to experience love and to feel accepted. And when there's an absence of that at that young age, when you're just trying to discover what it means to know who you are, it almost, in my mind, explains, in a sense, well, yeah, of course you want affection. I do that myself as I look at my life and some of the silly things that I do just to get people's acceptance of me. I mean, who doesn't want that?
Of course.
We're all guilty of it to some degree, but this trauma that you experienced as a young boy explains to me a lot of what people perceive to be, hey, recognize my work, recognize who I am as a person. So
I have nothing against ego. Look, I think I mentioned this to you, Rudy, that I wrote an article about ego. And I think I told you, and I'm going to say the title, and if you can't use it, you're going to delete it.
no,
First thing was, why is it that when you say somebody's egotistical, the word that always follows the word egotistical is the word bastard.
Mhm.
Always, you egotistical bastard, right? That was the title of the article, and I was talking about ego. There's nothing wrong with the ego. It's misplaced ego that's wrong. But if you have the right kind of ego, if I feel great because I did a book that I think was good, that's good ego. I want to do the book great so that it feeds my ego. I want to feed my ego. And yeah, for a kid with my background, yeah, I got an ego. And I want to keep feeding it as much as I can, So when I get emails from people saying, oh, you changed my life, your book, I love that. I like that. I feel good that I've accomplished. I helped somebody.
All right.
And that's important to me. And if you call that having your ego fed, fine.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm better for having known you. So I appreciate you, and I thank you for your friendship and for the work that we all get to benefit from. I'm a better magician because of you. So
thank you.
Harry.
You're feeding my ego, Rudy.
I'm going to keep on doing that. So, Harry, again, the privilege that I have to speak with you personally like this, it's just not lost on me. So thank you for, again, sharing some stories with me. I can't wait to our next conversation, Harry. Before I got on here on this call with Harry, I was talking with him about, in some of these interviews, taking a moment to show us what some of these sleights look like that are in his books. For example, Harryverse or the universal reversal. I mean, these are moves that are great utility items that we should be learning. And I would like to teach them, but Harry's here. We finally got his video to work. So now he can actually take a moment to show us some of these sleights. So Harry's going to show us what he calls his utility mixer, which is a great way to false shuffle a small packet. So it might remind you of another move, the Charlier shuffle, but the Charlier shuffle cuts the cards. In this case, it retains the cards in their order. Is that correct, Harry?
Yes.
And maybe give us a little bit of history on how you came up with this thing.
Well, I just wanted to have something, I didn't teach it for a long time, but in my latest book, and finally, I made a list somewhere of the tricks that I love, that I do all the time, where I always included the utility mixer. Just as a general idea, the first thing that comes to my mind is the 10-card poker deal.
Oh, yeah.
You want to have that set a certain way.
Yeah.
Well, I always did the utility mixer before I went into it when I took out the 10 cards so that the people wouldn't think they were in a certain order, which of course they were.
Right.
So I always did the utility mixer. Any effect where a small packet was needed or used, I used the utility mixer. Now, when I say small packet, I was doing 3-card Monte, and I mixed the aces, 3 cards, using the utility mixer, and it looks like the 3 cards are being mixed. And you could do it with the full deck. It looks like the whole deck is being mixed. But basically, mostly I use it for packets.
Okay.
Now, For example, look, I have from ace to king of clubs. Can you see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, this is the utility mixer. Look, I want to really mix these cards. Look, there's the utility mixer. I really want to make sure that these cards are mixed. And you know what? The sloppier, the better. I really want to mix them. But look, not a card changes position. Not a card. And finally, let's say there's one trick I do. It's called the world's greatest card handler. Talk about ego. That's that's the thing. You know why I named it that? Because I did that one trick for a group. I was doing a performance for a bunch of business people, and one of the people there, the president, knew my magic background, and he asked me to do at least one trick because I had to leave. I did this one trick, and as I left, one of the guys said, he's got to be the world's greatest card handler. So that's what I named the trick when I put it in a book. But in that trick, there's 4, 8, there's 16 cards I'm dealing with. And when I pick them up, it's the 4 aces with 3 cards on each. So there's 16 cards. And when I'm picking them up, I have to move one card from bottom to top in order to make the trick work. And I never taught this until and finally, I think. Because look, you can do this kind of mixture, and look, I just mixed it and got the bottom card to the top, but everything else is in exact order.
So that's a neat little touch, because I don't know that I don't think I saw you teach that in the book, because that adds a little extra.
Right, it looks like more shuffling, but you're accomplishing what you have to accomplish. Mm-hmm. Look, do you want me to teach the utility mixer? Yes. Okay, here's the utility mixer. You push off about a third from the top. The next third goes onto that, but out jogged, and the next third goes under it, matching the out jog, and then your hand has been here all the time anyway. Just pull it out and put it on top. That's it. You haven't done a thing. So in slow motion, look. That's it. Speed it up, and it looks like that. Now, when I wanted to move a card from the bottom, look, I did this, and as I did the last part, I held the bottom card and then pulled these out, put this here and put on top, and it's done. And incidentally, when I tell you you could do it with 3 cards, look, here's the 10 Jack Queen. And I'd say when I used to do a 3-card Monte, I don't do it very often, but when I do, look, let me mix those aces up a little bit. That's it. And you know something? It looks like they're being mixed. Nothing has changed.
It does. That's a great illusion there.
Exactly. In other words, that's why I'm so proud of this. It doesn't matter if you're using 52 cards or 3. It does look, boy, when I do it, I know that people believe me that these cards are being mixed. So there are a few tricks I do where I use only 3 or 4 cards. I use the utility mixer. So that basically, to make sure it's locked in your mind, you're pushing off 1, 2, 3, 4. A third off the top, put the next third on top of that, but out jogged, last underneath, also out jogged, and pull out the original, put them on top, and you're done. I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, as you should. It's good. I hope fellas will take a moment to learn it. All right. Well, Harry, again, thank you so much for taking time to hang out with me. I really enjoy our conversations and look forward to talking to you again very soon.
You mean we're all finished? I was ready to do another hour.